here's something I probably haven't made clear on this channel. I never really cared about the Fantastic Four. I think they are incredibly mediocre in concept. Because if you pair them with the Avengers, X-Men, and the Guardians of the Galaxy, they outclass the Fantastic Four in a lot of ways. The Avengers are a team of elite heroes that fight for the defenseless. The X-Men are a team of activists that fight for equality. And the Guardians of the Galaxy are a team of outlaws that literally do what the Fantastic Four do to a much greater degree. Whereas the Fantastic Four are just people with superpowers. Sure, you could say that they are scientists who go on adventures and fight supervillains, but at the end of the day, they're still people. Boring, everyday people. And you know what? As an old school Marvel fan myself, I truly believe that that's really the only interesting concept they have as a superhero team under the Marvel brand. The core concept of the Fantastic Four is that they are a family first and foremost. Them being scientists and adventurers is all a facade they simply utilize to mask their disconnect from the world they were once part of. They are clearly a superhero team that should not exist, and some of my favorite adaptations of the Fantastic Four actually obey this concept. Enter Fantastic Four: World's Greatest Heroes. This show, in my opinion, is the best animated depiction of the Fantastic Four, because not only does it portray the family aspect of the team graciously, but it also does the one thing with the Fantastic Four that frankly none of their other animated outings have done as good, and that's make them look cool and legitimate on screen. Not as scientists and adventurers, but as a family of superheroes. And as far as the live-action films go, there's really only one series of films that have gone in a similar direction with the Fantastic Four. One thing I've always appreciated about the Fantastic Four is their family dynamic and relatability. Tim Story's Fantastic Four dove deep into the family aspect of the team. This was actually the first and only time I've ever liked and appreciated the Fantastic Four. Unfortunately, this film ended up being categorized as one of the Marvel films that chose to copy off of the success of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films. And because of that, this film got inevitably mocked in pop culture. The reason why that's unfortunate is because this film actually nails the relatable human aspect of the Fantastic Four. Not only that, but this film also got inevitably criticized for choosing to be more of a family film or quote-unquote family sitcom than a Fantastic Four film. And as much as I understand why that criticism towards this film exists, I think there is some merit to be had behind why this decision was made by Fox. I get it, the Fantastic Four are like Star Trek, where they are a group of explorers that became a family after they got their powers from a radioactive cloud in outer space. And I think that was the point of Fox choosing to have this film and its sequel be more practical than fantastical with the Fantastic Four. Because they probably didn't want to go through the struggle of having to make CGI, space adventures, and battle scenes look good with them in film. You have to remember that Fantastic Four came out in a time when CGI and action-adventure films was on the rise. I mean, Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith was literally one of the very few movies to pull this off. And that film came out the same year as Fantastic Four. So because of that, I don't think that making the Fantastic Four look good on screen was ever possible in the 2000s. Which is why I believe that the Fantastic Four would have been better off being owned by Marvel instead of Fox. And the only person who can truly make the Fantastic Four look good on screen is James Gunn, because he did exactly that with the Guardians of the Galaxy and their films are outstanding. Not to mention, his take on Superman is literally everything that the Fantastic Four could have been back in 2005. But as far as the writing of Fantastic Four 2005 goes, I actually think the family sitcom approach is really good, and here's why. One thing that I feel not a lot of Fantastic Four stories do properly with the Fantastic Four, or at least not do properly enough with the team, is properly flesh out the human aspect of the team. And it's for that reason that I've always been more forgiving towards Tim Story's depiction of the Fantastic Four than most people. Because Fantastic Four at the very least feels like a tried and true Marvel story. The overall theme of Marvel's stories had always been centered around the relatability of superheroes. And the Fantastic Four, for the longest time, had always felt rather distant from that in concept. Most of the time, they tend to feel more like Marvel's Justice League than Marvel's First Family. Which is funny because the guy who created the Fantastic Four, Jack Kirby, is the same guy who created the New Gods, who are basically the Justice League times 1,000. And on top of that, he created Darkseid, one of the most iconic villains in the DC universe. Someone who Doctor Doom is literally the spinning image of. So when people say that Fantastic Four 2005 isn't really a Fantastic Four film, I'm always like, yeah, but compared to the comics, it actually feels like a Marvel story. But I do agree that from a character accuracy standpoint, it could be better. But again, in order for that to happen, it would have to be done by a studio that will actually allow CGI to be a storytelling tool alongside the characters, and will get writers who will make the characters stand out along with the story. Tim Story's Fantastic Four films really could have been every bit as successful and remarkable as the Raimi films if they had a more receptive studio and production crew behind them. And I know I said Marvel would be the best studio to produce Fantastic Four films, but truthfully I don't think that's possible, especially given that in recent times they have become more corporate driven than they have ever been. Even though the Fantastic Four are a Marvel owned property, still I think the best studio to produce successful films of the Fantastic Four would really be either Universal or Paramount. Universal may actually be the most reputable choice considering that they have had a lot of success with the Jurassic Park films and Alien. And Paramount, despite being a Viacom company, has proven time after time that they can work with larger-than-life sci-fi intellectual properties like Star Trek, which is exactly what the Fantastic Four needs. And I think the only kind of visual format you can really do that with is TV, because as we've seen with certain live-action adaptations like the 1994 motion picture and the 2015 reboot, it's impossible to get the Fantastic Four story done right in a film without having things like exposition and the comic book campiness take center stage. Especially if you're going to have it be comic book faithful, then yeah, you need to include those elements. You can't condense the Fantastic Four's origin story down to them just being a group of superheroes on their first day, because we don't really know these guys that well enough for them to have that kind of story treatment. And this is another reason why I'm more forgiving towards Fantastic Four 2005. They're not as popular as Spider-Man, because unlike the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man has actually had a successful lineup of films that fleshed out his origin, whereas the Fantastic Four really have only had one film that fleshed out their origin, and that of course was Fantastic Four 2005, which nobody supported because it was too campy. All of their other films have either been trash or painfully mediocre. The 1994 motion picture served its purpose as being a faithful portrayal of the Fantastic Four, but it completely lacked substance and scale. Fantastic Four Rise of the Silver Surfer is a disorganized mess. Fanforstic chose to go in a Batman Begins direction with the Fantastic Four, and it did not help the franchise at all. And based on what we're getting with the Fantastic Four in the MCU, we still might not know who they are at this point. You can never have the Fantastic Four be dark and grounded, because that's not in their DNA. That's not the Fantastic Four. However, one way I think you can have the Fantastic Four be dark and grounded is by having them go through a similar arc as the White family in Breaking Bad. This is something that comic book writer Jonathan Hickman did with the Fantastic Four in the original Ultimate Marvel Universe. And it was successful, because one, it hit all of the notes with acknowledging the human aspect of the Fantastic Four, and two, it still managed to stay true to the core concepts of the Fantastic Four. Something that Fanforstic failed to do, even though you can clearly tell that it tried to be like Ultimate Fantastic Four, and it failed to do that as well. But the biggest reason why I think the Fantastic Four are weird is that conceptually they don't really feel like they belong in the Marvel Universe. Because as I mentioned previously, the Fantastic Four don't really feel like a family in the comics, but rather a full-time superhero team like the Justice League. And it's because most of their villains are larger-than-life supervillains. Doctor Doom, the Fantastic Four's most popular villain, is obviously a villain you could see squaring off against the Justice League 24/7, and even be on par with the Legion of Doom. Hell, I could already see him giving Lex Luthor a serious run for his money, as being the team's leader, because not only would he be the perfect representation of the team based on the name, but also he's more powerful than Lex Luthor, and much like Darkseid, has a legion of bots by his side. Whereas Luthor, much like Batman, is an insanely rich guy with a suit full of kryptonite and weapons. So because of that, I don't think the Fantastic Four at this point are really worth adapting on screen anymore. because whatever Marvel Studios does with them in future films will likely just be a repeat of what's already been done successfully with the Guardians of the Galaxy. The Fantastic Four are commonly referred to as Marvel's first family, yet in a lot of their stories outside of the films, they are often portrayed as being Marvel's gods. And that is ultimately what leads to the Fantastic Four being classified as weird. Anyways, that's it for this one, folks. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will talk to you later.